Good morning. On behalf of the criminal justice faculty, welcome to Uncuffing a Criminal Justice Degree, Exploring Non-Policing Career Paths. First, I'd like to thank our dean, Dr. Susan Gooden, for the support she provided to make this event possible. I'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of our communications team and the Office of Student Success. Katie and Adrian, we need to clone you. I'm Dr. Cook, chair of the Criminal Justice Program. Students often ask two questions. The first is, besides being a police officer, what can I do with a criminal justice degree? And then the second question is, what piece of advice do you have for me? Both are great questions and are what inspired us to assemble this panel of local criminal justice professionals who are here today to discuss their career. As you'll see, each of these are somewhat dependent upon the action of the police because the police are the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system. But the criminal justice system is so much larger than police. While we recognize that police play an instrumental role in a civil society, today we are here to highlight the non-policing career paths available to you as a student. And interestingly enough, every one of our panelists has a criminal justice degree of some sort. As far as my advice to students, I always push students to complete an internship because it's the best training or any type of experience you'll ever get. You'll learn so much, and it's going to open your eyes to the reality of the criminal justice system and working with the public in more ways than you can imagine. And the best part about an internship is that it can be credit-bearing. So it's like a class for you. It can be the difference between landing a job or not landing a job. So in an effort to provide answers to those questions on a much wider scale, we're here today to help you be a successful student. After the discussion, we hope you take advantage of the resources that we have here offered by the Office of Student Success. Be sure to sign up to get more information about internships. Talk to your professors. We're here. Dr. Lehman is here, Dr. Albanese, Dr. Worry, Dr. Brubaker, Dr. Balistrieri. Is that it? If I missed you, stand up. I think I got you all. So please come to us, talk to us. We are here to help you. We love to engage in these conversations. So while you're listening to this moderated discussion today, I want you to see yourself in one of these positions. I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists before I invite Dr. Lehman up here, who's going to moderate the discussion. We have Teresa Brown, Erica Clark, Thomas Kohlbeck, Jen MacArthur, and Sydney Smith. All right, Dr. Lehman, you can come on up.
Morning, everybody. As a lot of y'all know, my name is Dr. Lehman. You can call me Brad if you'd like. I'm excited to moderate this panel today with a lot of rich history with VCU, rich history in different types of roles in the criminal justice system. And for a lot of y'all, this might be your first exposure to an event that is not focused around or heavily inundated with law enforcement representation. So I would like to do a quick introduction and have you all say a few things about yourself and then I have a few questions. And what I hope to get out of this is that it's very natural conversation back and forth. And then the thing I will ask for the audience is to be involved and prepare some questions for a Q&A at the end, because there's a lot that you can learn just by asking questions and making connections. And then when we're done, feel free to continue that conversation. If you all have a few minutes for them to come chat around the room, that would be wonderful as well. So starting here, do you mind saying a few things?
I think we're sharing, John. That's fine. Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. As Dr. Cook said, my name is Sydney Smith. I am a two-time VCU grad, go Rams. I got my undergraduate degree here back in 2017, and I continued with my master's in 2019. And I had the opportunities to be a graduate teaching assistant. I did so many wonderful things here at VCU, and I currently am the Senior Employment Navigator with a local reentry and recovery nonprofit, Real Life, and I'm excited to talk with you all more about that today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen MacArthur. I have known I wanted to go into the criminal justice system since I was in junior high. I will not take you back that far. But what I wanted to do changed. And so after getting my undergraduate from Fordham University in sociology and psychology and taking every criminal justice class I could, I did a year doing reentry work for the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and then I came to VCU. For my graduate degree in criminal justice. And people said, what are you gonna do with a graduate degree in criminal justice? And I said, there is so much I can do. What I really thought I wanted to do was federal law enforcement. So I got about 3/4 of the way through my degree, and I decided I not only didn't want to do federal law enforcement, I didn't want to do law enforcement. And I thought, oh my God, what am I gonna do with this graduate degree in criminal justice? At the time, I was working part-time for a local reentry nonprofit, and my supervisor said, you know, there's this position opening up for a local probation officer in Chesterfield County. I think you should apply for it. And so I did, and much to my surprise, I got the job. And it was the perfect fit for me. It was the perfect balance between helping people and holding people accountable. And so most of my career has actually been in local probation and pretrial services. I went from an officer, I spent a year as a clinician in a specialty program, and then went on to be a supervisor in another jurisdiction, and then the director of community corrections and pretrial services for the city of Richmond. From there, I did a brief stint at the Office of the Attorney General in their as a reentry coordinator, and then went on to my current role as the manager of the Adult Justice Program section at the Department of Criminal Justice Services. So kind of went pretty linear from nonprofit world to local governments and now with the state. And so now the programs that I oversee are mostly local probation, pretrial services, reentry, and jail-based mental health and substance abuse services. So it's kind of what my team does now. So I am really excited to be here with you guys today.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, cool. So my name's Thomas Kohlbeck. I'm a lead intelligence analyst for the Virginia Department of State Police. I started basically my college career back in 2003. Originally went to UVA Wise and then transferred to VCU after being a little far away from home. Wise is a little smaller than the Richmond area for sure. But came back to VCU, graduated with a dual degree with majors in Homeland Security, Emergency Preparedness, Criminal Justice, and Political Science. After that time, I graduated in December of 2008, which was the greatest time in the world to try and find a job in government. Let me tell you what, it was very robust. But ended up landing over at Virginia State Police initially as a part-time analyst. I had previously worked there in the Firearms Transaction Center part-time from 2005 to 2006, so I felt like that kind of helped me get a good step into the department. So my first position with them when I got out of college was doing sexual assault, domestic violence, and stalking work all over the state of Virginia. I was on a multi-agency partnership that was dedicated towards the arrest and enforcement of protective orders. After I did that for a couple of years, I also did a cooperative agreement with the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police and was their domestic violence program coordinator, and then decided, okay, after being funded year to year on a grant, I'd like to get something a little bit more permanent, and transitioned into the Fusion Center as an intelligence analyst. Since that time, I've spent most of my career working on unsolved violent crimes and cold cases. I have a team of analysts that I work with and supervise. We provide assistance throughout the Commonwealth on all, unsolved homicides, missing persons cases, unidentified human remains cases, and violent sex offenses. And we're really, hand in hand with the case agents. If you can imagine, basically doing cell phone analysis, link analysis, doing evidentiary review, taking a case file and reviewing it from start to finish, you're saying, well, that sounds a lot like what you would do as a detective. or an agent. It is, and we really work hand in hand with our case agents, because the best, path for you to be the best analyst you can be is to really know the cases that you're involved in. And so that's just kind of my backstory, how I got from, college to where I am now, and turn it over.
Hi there, I'm Erica Clark, and I work for Henrico Victim Witness Services in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for Henrico. I'm also a two-time graduate of VCU, loved it here, and I studied criminal justice undergrad as well as French. I'll get into that later. And then I got my master's in sociology, focusing on gender violence intervention, and that kind of leads me into the career path I am now.
Good morning. My name is Teresa Dobson Brown, and I am super excited to be here with you all today. Thank you, Dr. Cook, for your invitation. I am a former VCU student, go Rams again. I received my undergraduate degree in 1997, and then, I'm sorry, December 19, we graduated together, right? December 1997, and then my master's degree in December 2020. And I was honored to be the graduate speaker for the Wilder School, so that was super fun. I also am employed with the Department of Juvenile Justice. I'm in my 25th year. I have served in many, many roles except the boss. So I have been a corrections officer, a counselor. I have served as a probation officer for the last 19 years. And within that role, there are a lot of jobs within that role of probation officer. I've been an intake officer, community officer, and I'm currently an investigative officer. I do all the background reports for juvenile cases, and I sit with the judges as a court expediter. So that's mainly my job. I have worked for the city of Richmond as probation officer. I've worked in Henrico County, and I'm currently in Chesterfield. In a nutshell, that's how I've moved from college to my current employment.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your introductions, and I think that should give you a good feel about where you can go in your careers. A lot of students, as you can see here, some are graduating this semester, right? That's awesome, right? Yeah. Which means you have to start thinking about, if you haven't already done so, start thinking about where you might want to go, right? What you might want to do. So just the five people that you have up here should open your eyes a little bit to where you might be able to see yourselves sitting up here. And I think we would love to see that down the road. Some of y'all back up here, giving back to your community, investing in the next generation. So I know we have a few questions for you all, and I hope this is very holistic in how we discuss. So I want to start off with the first question. And some of y'all already led into kind of getting into your position. So can you tell me, and whoever wants to go first is fine, can you tell me what helped you get your first position straight out of college? And specifically in the criminal justice field, where all y'all are now. And I might switch this a little bit. Not just what helped you get to your current position, but also who helped you get to your current position, if you don't mind. So any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to go first.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll be the guinea pig, I promise. So I feel as though I'm a little fresh out of my graduate program. And so the biggest thing that helped me here at VCU was networking. I cannot preach that enough. My time at VCU was well spent, involved with many organizations, but if you're a criminal justice major or minor or thinking about it or anything like that, I was involved with the National Criminal Justice Honor Society here at VCU, Alpha Phi Sigma. And I had the pleasure of serving as president in that role a few times. And I was able to network with a lot of different individuals within the criminal justice realm. Not only police, not only courts, not only corrections, but reentry, recovery, everything like that. And through the help of some of my professors, I was able to do that, and I had the opportunity to go inside the Richmond City Jail back in 2016, tour the jail, meet Dr. Sarah Scarborough, meet the former sheriff, and really understand what that world was. And I asked a simple question: how can I help? And she said, we just need hygiene kits because these folks are coming out of incarceration and have nothing. They get what was on their backs when they came in a bus pass, and Well, now buses are free, so they don't even get that. So that's how I helped. And it was just a little that I could do, but it made a big difference. And when Dr. Scarborough came out in the community in 2017, I still helped. I still did what I could. And in 2019, I was looking for an internship with a gentle nudge from my professor, Dr. Amy Cook. And I reached out to Dr. Scarborough and I said, hey, are you looking for an intern? And she said yes. So I did receive credit for my internship in my last semester of my graduate studies. And she texted me 2 weeks before I was to graduate and go off to Ireland for a week and asked me if I had a job that I was returning to. And I said, I just plan to go back to what I was doing and then find something eventually. And she said, don't worry about it, I'm creating something for you. And she wanted me to interview that. So I interviewed super jet lagged, I don't remember it. But I mean, my first position out of college is my current position, and I'm so happy of where I am and how I got there. And my biggest piece of advice for you all is networking. I can't say that enough.
Excellent.
I'll go next. There's a little bit of a lag between getting my degree in criminal justice and then working in the field of criminal justice because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I think this would have been really helpful back then. But that was in 2007 I got that degree, and I really just didn't know where I wanted to go with it. I knew I didn't want to be a police officer. I thought about law. So I worked for a law firm for a short amount of time, and honestly, that was just a lucky hire, I think. But I learned I didn't want to be a lawyer and left that job and ended up going into grad school because I wanted to work with victims in some kind of capacity or do research or writing or prevention. And so I found the sociology program at VCU, and I really liked what they had going on with the gender violence intervention certificate and the focus of the study. So I entered that program and ended up interning at the place where I work now, which is the Henrico Victim Witness Program. So getting out there and interning really helped me to get my foot in the door. Like she said, it's networking, getting that experience under your belt. I also did an internship undergrad at the Virginia State Crime Commission at the General Assembly's office, which also taught me what I didn't want to do. But that's good because, you don't know until you do it. But it was a good experience, something that will stick with me forever. So certainly I think getting out there and interning or volunteering with different programs is really important if you can do it. And if you can't get an internship because spaces are limited, ask to shadow. I've had students come to my program and shadow for a day, and you know what? That counts, in my opinion. You get to see what's out there, you get maybe network, get your face out there. All those things are really positive.
Thank you.
I'll go next.
Yeah.
I think I've always known that I wanted to work with at-risk youth. As soon as I came out of college, I pretty much landed my job with the Department of Juvenile Justice, which was unheard of. You don't typically sometimes get to go right into what you have a passion for. So I believe VCU was instrumental in how I landed the job because I did not have any real world experience because I was coming right out of college. I too only had the internships, which I did with Richmond Police. I did the Richmond Police Athletic League where I was, with children during the summer and we're doing programs with them, which I absolutely loved. And I did the Richmond Truancy Center that they used to have. So that gave me a little exposure. But really it was the curriculum, the classes, the introduction classes that really set me up. And then of course I was hungry and excited about getting in the field and really wanted to help people. So I think that was, that helped me to land the job. So just basically, I don't know, dumb luck or just it was the right time for me. So that's how I got in. And it really wasn't a person, but I think it was the school and just my interactions with kids that prepared me.
Thank you.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, for me, like I mentioned, I did kind of have an idea of what I wanted to do when I graduated. It was more what was going to be open because of the time in which I graduated in 2008. But law enforcement was kind of already in the DNA and kind of the way I knew I wanted to go. Just a matter of how did that best fit. And so, already having worked in state police and the Firearms Transaction Center definitely helped me because I had the background check, went through that process already, made some relationships through that. here at VCU, constantly communicating with my professors throughout my time here, as well as, I don't know if you all are familiar with Eta Lambda Sigma, the Homeland Security fraternity here at VCU. I was vice president for that, its second year of existence, and we were actually trying to also start up an International Association of Emergency Managers chapter. So I did stay very involved in some of the extracurricular activities here at VCU, which helped network down the road. The other thing too is, and I know this is something I would just, tell all of you, for me, I worked every semester I was in college, because I felt like it was good to have that in addition to my academics, held supervision, positions as well while I was in the workforce prior to getting in my current role. So I would just say that, that definitely helps out to have that employment experience, because employers are going to look at that and say, okay, what have you done in addition to going to school? And so you can say, well, even if it's working, at Best Buy or it's working at Costco, wherever you may be working, like, hey, that you actually have some, experience working with folks. The other thing too is that the interpersonal skills you develop in retail and food service and things like that are going to greatly assist you in any job you take, especially in the criminal justice field. So I would not downplay that at all. Flashing forward, when I arrived at Department of State Police, the first position I was in was a part-time grant-funded position, okay? And like I mentioned, that dealt with, domestic violence, sexual assault and stalking, and focusing on the protective order registry. Well, that position, when I got it, I was like, okay, it's grant funded, so obviously it has a certain time period in which it's funded for, and it can only do so much work. Well, the first day I arrived, the person who was in the full-time position on the grant looked at me and said, hey, I'm leaving for another agency, so my last day here is in 2 weeks, so let me train you as much as I can, but do what you can with this position. I said, okay, and so I kind of had to rise to the occasion with that one and really show my supervisors at the time what I could do. The other thing is the task force that I started out on, the folks on that task force had way more in terms of years of experience than I did, but I didn't look at that as, a challenge. I just looked at, okay, I need to rise up to this occasion. And so for me, it was kind of taking the football and running with it. Every position that I've been in with our department have been relatively new positions initially when they were created. And so I always looked at those and said, okay, what is the position doing currently, and where can I see this position going, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and so on. And so, for example, the position that I'm in right now originally was a senior analyst position assigned to one of our other teams in the Fusion Center. Then through the work I did on several, big cases around the state, and also the integration I had with the field program, they were like, okay, we need to elevate you to what we call a lead analyst or a supervisory analyst. And then from that point, I grew myself from a unit of one or team of one to a team of 5 now, and we're constantly growing. The other thing too is that I did is a startup internship and volunteer program at our Fusion Center for students, and I can say since 2018 we've had over 40 students come through our internship and volunteer program. A lot of those folks have been through VCU. Some of them you may even know. But so far we've had a really good success rate. Over 90% of those students have received jobs either with us in the Fusion Center or with local, state, private sector and federal government in a variety of capacities, predominantly in the intelligence field, but we've had them throughout. So VCU is home ground for us. I mean, we like to bring a lot of students on board, but we also recruit from other universities as well. So I just throw that out there because I know we're talking about internships and volunteers as well.
And so, yeah, and I'm really just going to echo a lot of what's already been said. I will say that really was, I did internships as a undergraduate, and so I worked in victim witness, and then I did an internship not at all related to community corrections or criminal justice even, although it was in housing, so there's some intersections there. And then when I was at VCU, and this is the best internship I've ever had because, as you pointed out, it taught me what I did not want to do, which is a good use of my time. I was the first intern at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and not on the regulatory side, on the special agent side. I went home every week and was like, those guys are crazy. Have a lot of respect for what they do, but decided I did not want to do it. Between that and all of my studies were in violent homicides and sex crimes, I thought, I've got to change paths here. I'm not sleeping well at night. So good to know your own boundaries, good to learn both through your schoolwork, don't discount that, and what you think your interests are, and in your internship opportunities. Now, I know we've got some seniors in the room. If you have not done internships, don't freak out. They are great for both what you want to do, what you don't want to do, but part-time work, volunteer work, all of those things. A lot of what I had going into my first, kind of full-time job in local probation was a lot of casework experience. When I had worked for nonprofits, when I had volunteered, all of those things, I had also had proximity with the population I would be serving. And so I was comfortable with that population. I knew, a good foundational experience about it. And so I think those are just some things you can do to set yourself up well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I think that really highlights the exploring part of it, right? The fact that, I don't know about y'all, but I was in your seats not that long ago, but it has been a while now. The exploring part is true too, right? Because you don't have to know exactly what you want. And if you are, you're very lucky to know and find, the thing that you want to do. So just for time's sake, I actually want to combine two questions together, and we'll just kind of see where that goes. Can you tell us about a typical workday in your field? How your studies helped prepare you for it, and can you give us an example of like a real life story or a cool case or a situation that you see yourselves in? It doesn't necessarily have to be exciting, but something that is important to your field. So again, tell us about your day, tell us about how your degree studies helped or didn't help, and tell us about something interesting.
I can go first again.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be blunt with you all because I wish somebody was blunt with me. Nonprofit work is not the most glamorous work out there. I'm going to say that first and foremost. I don't sit in a swanky office with an administrative assistant to bring me coffee or lunch or anything like that. But my work is so rewarding. My day-to-day consists of working with our clients. Our population we serve is ex-offenders. They're coming out of incarceration, and they're also in recovery. So we actually have 12 recovery houses in Richmond, Virginia. They're all on the bus line around here, and we operate them. We have about 126 beds that we operate fully, and I get to work with every single client we have. We serve both males and females. So my day-to-day is I'm constantly on my phone. I'm doing client interaction, either face-to-face. I also do class instruction. My main role at Real Life is I'm the senior employment navigator, so it's my job to help our clients gain and most importantly maintain employment. And this role was created for me because that's what I did in my old job pretty much, and employment is a crucial piece to somebody's success coming out of incarceration, right? Meaningful employment. So I'm interacting with them face to face, either via call, Zoom, whatever it may be. I'm also teaching classes, like I said, on employability skills. I actually do go into jails and prisons and teach that as well for folks going through our program in the jails that we partner with. And I'm in constant communication with our case managers on staff that do the criminogenic risk assessments on our folks, and we have to make sure that we're all on the same page to make sure that our clients have the best chance at success. I think one of the most memorable stories I have for you all, and if I've ever been a guest speaker and you've heard this story before, I'm really sorry, but it is memorable. I worked with a gentleman that came to us in 2020. He had served 32 years in prison. He went in the early 90s and came out in 2020. He didn't know what Google was. He didn't know what an email was. He didn't know that you could get a job online now. Cars were different, transportation was different, everything was different for him. And when he came to us, I think I talked to him more than I talked to my family for a while, to help him in the day-to-day to make sure he didn't revert and deal with institutionalization, right? I'm sure you've learned that in your corrections class and your theories classes and everything like that. So my biggest reward with him is helping him find his worth. He was able to get a great job. He won Employee of the Year. He did fantastic, and he since moved on from that job and continued branching up, and he actually was on staff with Real Life for a good long term with us, and he has since moved on and onto something better. But after doing 35 years in prison, you don't really know what's going on, right? And coming out and being able to have a second chance and have somebody help you navigate that is just so crucial, because we don't want them to revert and go back in that revolving door that is so talked about, right? So that has been my most memorable story. He is doing fantastic, and we work with all walks of life. So I loved that part. And I think you asked about my degree. My degree helped me tremendously with the job that I am at now. I don't work in the big three, courts, corrections, or policing, but having the knowledge of those big three has helped me navigate talking with our clients, because they have been involved in those three, right? So I have to have an understanding of everything like that. I'm also involved in policy change. I'm out there lobbying for policies to help our clients. I am working one-on-one with the police in community, because change happens in the community first and foremost. And I am also in jails. I go to jail. I get to leave at the end of the day, but I go to jails and I instruct so we can start the change there. And that has been crucial, and my degree has thoroughly helped me with that and prepared me for being able to do that. So
Thank
super
you.
grateful for that.
So it's very rewarding too, as far as like a breaking the cycle system. So
Yeah.
if you're interested more in real life, stay afterwards, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you're good with questions, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Same question.
I guess I'll go next. And I realize I haven't really talked much about what I do, so I'm going to briefly kind of go over that. So as a victim advocate, or I think our official title is victim services specialist, my job is to provide support services before, during, and after the trial process. Or if there's an investigation that doesn't get charged, for example, we do work with victims on those cases as well. And I'm going to use the word victim because that's the legal term, okay? And our services are provided or guaranteed under the Victims' Bill of Rights in Virginia, so that's kind of where my job comes from. I work hand in hand with the Commonwealth Attorney. We're all in the same office, so we are systems-based, meaning we're in the court system, criminal justice system, and so we're working on that end. However, I'm not an attorney, I don't make decisions, I'm just there for support and to kind of be a mediator and, you know, help them navigate that process and that system. We also work one-on-one with probation officers and with police and with like community advocates. So like I'm a victim advocate in the system, a systems-based community advocate, but they are community-based advocates as well, like for at Safe Harbor or the YWCA that has those kind of advocates. So yeah, that's kind of a brief introduction about what I do. But a typical workday, honestly, there is no typical workday. I am all over the place. Like I'm either in court, I'm in a meeting, or I'm at my desk briefly to make phone calls, which is where most of my work gets done, is preparing for court. Court's kind of like the final exam, right? That's the end of the road for most of my work with a person. So I'm honestly most of the time in court or in a meeting, sometimes going to homes, which is more rare, but I have done that. I've had to go to the hospital to provide services. I've even had to go to the jail once with someone who had been charged, but there was some underlying domestic violence of which they were a victim, and they had me go to provide some services to that person. So yeah, like I said, it's not typical, but I would say the degree helped in terms of initially, right, knowing the terms, the lingo, how things work a little bit. But certainly getting your foot in the door, having that experience is going to change everything. If you come in and you don't know what a certain term or abbreviation is, or what the difference between a misdemeanor or felony is, you're going to have a lot of work to do. So the degree certainly helped with that. And I think just the studies in general with having internships really helped. I was lucky enough to have an internship in the program where I work, so that gave me that firsthand experience, and I didn't feel like thrown in or shocked by much once I actually got in and was doing the job. A real life story, there's many. One I'm trying to think of, so I can give a good one and a bad one. I'll give a good one first. I worked for about 2 years with this victim of sexual assault, and it was a long road. Those cases sometimes take a long time. It's so stressful and frustrating. There's a million continuances. There's evaluations being done. You know, we had a trial date. Someone didn't show up, so it had to be continued. very, very difficult for the victim, and the criminal justice system is not based on the victim and how they're feeling or their healing. So it is certainly can be very re-traumatizing. And so this particular person, she really hung in there. She was cooperative, and sometimes I had to track her down when I couldn't reach her. She's a professional woman with kids, and she was just very busy. So getting her to all these court dates and meetings and to a trial to testify after 2 years after an incident was really, really tough on her. But at the end of the day, we had a guilty finding, and seeing the look on her face when the defendant was found guilty kind of makes that whole process worth it for me. You know, for her, that's a different story, and she was very pleased, obviously. But seeing that hard work and her being able to pull through with that guilty finding was really, really rewarding. And then kind of the opposite side, I had someone, it was a really bad domestic violence case. The victim in that case, she did everything right. She, you know, called the police. She got a new home where the offender didn't know where she was. She got a protective order. She was in counseling at Safe Harbor. Her son was in counseling because he witnessed the abuse. And it was probably 6 to 9 months until we had our court date, and we were meeting with her, preparing her. We were good to go. And then the day of court, she shows up and says she's not testifying and refused. And so we couldn't go forward at that time without forcing her to do so, and that could have put her in a position to perhaps change the story or lie or something, and we didn't want to put her in that position at that time. So that change was really hard because it was kind of the opposite. You know, she had really come so far, and I was really proud of her, and she was really proud of herself. And then, you know, she changed her mind for some different reasons. And there's different obstacles for people. So certainly studying like some of the classes that revolve around the more sociological aspects and like how different people from different backgrounds are affected or impacted certainly helps know how to address someone as well.
Thank you.
I'll go next. Okay. I did say earlier, in the last 19 years, I've been a probation officer, and I've done different things, and I just want to kind of just talk just a little bit about each one, so you all kind of know what we do and if you are interested in it. So as a community probation officer, we are assigned cases that have been, kids that have been placed on probation by a judge. And so we pretty much follow the case from, you know, beginning through 6 months. Sometimes I've had kids up to 2 years, just depending on how much, trouble they were in. But we just follow through with them, make sure they adhere to the court order. As an intake officer, which they're the gatekeepers, and we are second responders, law enforcement, our first responders. Our job was basically civil and criminal process. So we work in close relations with law enforcement, social services, and the schools. We issue petitions for CHINs, which are children in need of services, to murder, which that would be dealing with law enforcement. We also, on the civil side, we work closely with these guys here, and we issue petitions for protective orders and things of that nature. Now I am an investigative officer. I'm basically a court expediter, and so I sat on the bench with the judge and the clerk, and I am part of the court work group, which as a court service unit, under the Department of Juvenile Justice, we are the court service unit. We make sure that the judge have all the tools and services that are available that we provide, as well as what's in the community. We also on the work group is the judge, Commonwealth attorney, assistant Commonwealth attorney, defense attorney, and sometimes a guardian ad litem, which is an advocate just for the child. The defense attorney deals with their constitutional rights and get them the best deal, right? So I'm a part of hearing trial cases, pre-trial hearings, which in the adult world is called arraignments. The actual adjudication is only for juveniles. Convictions are for adults. So we do adjudications because they're not a record of court, whereas adult cases are. We still want to give kids an opportunity to get good jobs, maybe go into the military and go to college. So we protect children. I also am responsible for all the background reports. So when I'm not in the courtroom, which is usually 2 or 3 times a week, I'm in my office conducting investigation interviews, risk assessments, trauma assessments, which all go into the social history. And the social history is really a big story about the child. The child is more than just that particular incident that they were involved in. And we want the court to know that. And then we make recommendations, what we think are the best services and sometimes consequences for kids. In terms of my degree, especially my master's degree, I think that it has been extremely helpful to my day-to-day. My education informs me of how to, make good decisions, critical thinking, in terms of research methods, which I struggled with the most. I hate to say that at research school, but now I really understand why it's so important, because it informs us how we measure outcomes and what are the best programs and practices, because we don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to use some models that are already out there. So, of course, the foundational courses, introducing you to corrections, introducing you to community probation and community policing, all of that ties together. We definitely network with the mental health, so like I said, social services, the schools, and law enforcement, but above all, youth and families. And so I have a whole lot of cases. 25 years, y'all know I've seen it all, pretty much done it all. But the two cases, I have two bad and one good, and I'm gonna combine them. When I was a probation officer in Henrico County, I had two murder cases that I was involved with. They were high profile. Of course, they made the news, which made me do more work. One case, I had a young man, probably a year. He decided that at 18, he wants to up the ante and decides to shoot someone in a drug deal gone bad. So what we have to do is we have to maintain those cases throughout the court process until they have been adjudicated. So that was here, it was in Popeye's Chicken Restaurant parking lot on Chamberlain Avenue, so that made Richmond news. That young man received 25 years, just turned 18, so pretty much had blown his young adult life. And then the other case was, I think, closer to 2007. It was the Hong Kong restaurant murder, where the young man and his friends they robbed the owner of the store, and they shot him at gunpoint. Now, our job is, right after this crime is committed, I have to go in detention and meet with these young people, and it's alleged, right? So I don't know if they did it or not, right? So during the court process, a few months down the road, I found out that the youth that I was working with, as they will be your family. I hate to say but my kid was the shooter. And it just broke my heart, because I was just hoping, I hope he's not the one, but he was actually the one, and he got 90 years. Had a pretty good attorney, got him down to 35, but that's still a lot. So he was 17, so, he may have some quality of life later on, but, just those one moment decisions have cost them. On a more positive note, I had a young lady that was notorious in the Tidewater area, and when she came to Bonaire, she was interesting. She made it. Her father stumbled across me in the community, and he was like, I got something for you. So he came back, because I was working part-time somewhere, and he brought me this wonderful picture where she was in the military. She had joined the Army. And that formal picture with the flag behind you, I got that picture still in my office. And I always say, that's my motivation. If that's the only one that I touched their life, to change it. She was living in Hawaii at the time. She was stationed in Hawaii, had gotten married, had a family, and just completely turned her life around. I won't say it was all contributed to me, but I was somewhere in the mix of trying to redirect and change her environment. So those would be my examples.
Thank you, yeah, and
Yes.
I appreciate the realistic nature of it too, right? That it's not all glamorous, but it also can be very rewarding from all the stories, right? So, same question, we got a few more minutes for this question.
Sure. So every day is different. If you walk in and think that, okay, I have these things to do and I'm going to accomplish it today, no, okay? That's not how it's going to work, all right? It's going to be very different from that, because you're going to get a lot of things thrown at you. So, for example, like yesterday, All right, one of the things we're doing is we're in the process of renewing our grant that, 2 of our analysts are funded out of, as well as other partner agency positions for the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. So obviously I had to do some work on that. Then we had to do an evidentiary review with the lab, and go over some advanced testing we want to do on a case. We had to lend an assist to an out-of-state agency on doing investigative genetic genealogy research. Then I had a conversation with a potential family member of a victim of an unidentified remains case, a Jane Doe case that we have from 1991. And then after that, I had to sign timesheets. So, you do a little bit of everything on each day, and quite frankly, I mean, a lot of our work, it is, in the office, but it's also getting out there and meeting with the case agents that we're working with, meeting with our partner agencies to ensure that we're getting good collaboration. We work with the National Center for Misexploited Children, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, NamUs, National Missing and Unidentified Person System. So we're constantly collaborating not only within our agency, but other local, state, and federal partners as well. And like I mentioned, our day-to-day work, it's very much casework, working on those cases. So, could be sitting there, reviewing a case file, trying to review old leads and see, okay, maybe this person, was around the scene of our crime at that time, and they just kind of chalked it off to, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, what have they done for us recently? Okay, well, we find out this person had, 2 rape charges, within the last 15 years. Yeah, okay, now they're elevated compared to where they were back then. So, trying to look at those things, also too, trying to look not only the cases individually, but also from a 3,000-foot lens. Okay, is this case connected to this case? Is this case connected to that one? I mean, we worked on thousands of cases overall, around the Commonwealth, and of course assist to other states. And I can tell you some of these cases we're so intimately involved in that I've sat in meetings, and as an agency or, one of our own agencies presenting a case, I'm like, this seems familiar to another case that I'm working in another jurisdiction. And sure enough, it ended up being that way. So you just never know what's going to hit you on the day-to-day things. And as far as how VCU helped prepare me for that, I would definitely say the writing intensive courses I took throughout the majors, as well as the critical thinking skills developed from the different courses are critical in any of these professions. You may not realize it now, and I'm telling you, there are a lot of things that you're learning right now in your coursework that you're like, what does this have to do with anything? Okay, I was there, I get it. But then you're going to look back on it now, me being a little over 14 years with the department, and say, oh wow, what I learned back then in, Dr. Cook's Intro to Corrections class, was relevant because of this reason, or, something from one of your gen eds, you're like, why am I taking this? Well, it helps you, it makes you more well-rounded. As far as, real life stories, I mean, there are so many cases that I've assisted on and my team has assisted on, and you hear me use the word team a lot because this is not an individual effort. If you're part of a highly functional and successful investigative, apparatus. You have agents that are doing the things that they need to do. You have analysts that are doing the things that they need to do. You have Commonwealth's attorneys who are doing the things that they need to do. And so some of my most successful cases have been where we have a true multidisciplinary approach. And if, in fact, also having, victim advocates on hand to work with the victims' families if it's a homicide case or if it is a sexual assault case, ensuring that we have victim advocates there as well. But I'm just going to take a quick moment because this would take a really long time to give you an entire overview of this case. But a couple of cases that sit, close to me and always have. I was the analyst from the state police assigned to the Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington cases. If you're not familiar, Hannah was a missing student from the University of Virginia back in 2014, and Morgan was a missing student, who went missing back in 2009 from the John Paul Jones Arena Metallica concert. She was a Virginia Tech student. These cases were connected to an unsolved sexual assault case from 2005 up in George Mason. And I can tell you, Morgan's case, I had worked with the case agent on for quite some time in my position. And then when Hannah's case, developed, basically very early on, we were asked to lend an assist by, the Charlottesville Police Department, and we were working with Charlottesville PD, Albemarle PD, FBI, as well as all the VSP representatives out there. And my involvement in that case, I mean, I could give an hour-long overview, but we don't have time for that. But basically, I had to go through and look at Jesse Matthew, the offender in that case's cell phone records, the content on his cell phone. I was taking a look at Hannah's, cell phone records to see what she was doing. I was reviewing surveillance footage. I was helping examine leads as they were coming into the command post, and trying to flush those out really quick. Ensure that, leads that were obviously, okay, this sounds like it could be good, but once we verify, information about the individual, okay, they were not there, we could see that through social media, whatever it may be, trying to flush those out very quickly. But I give that case example, and there's a lot of intricate parts to it, because that was a case or cases in which I was driving back and forth from Charlottesville to Richmond, working, 12 to 16-hour days for, 3 months straight, and then I was driving back and forth to from Richmond to Charlottesville on a regular basis, to help support the investigation as it moved forward, and eventually to successful, plea agreements and so forth. And I say that is one of the cases that, or those are the cases that stick with me, pretty good. But also too, another case is which was the abduction and missing persons case of Alexis Murphy out of Nelson County. That one sticks with me very, very closely, because that is one where literally, kind of like Hannah's case, I started, from the very beginning and saw it all the way through. And again, same thing, we identified the offender, looking and building that lifestyle pattern of the offender and the victim, reviewing the surveillance footage, reviewing the cell phone stuff, trying to put all the pieces together, develop link analysis. And the Commonwealth's attorney in that case actually asked me, hey, I need your help, when we go to trial on this one, kind of like I've done for grand juries on others. And he was like, I would like for you to second chair with me during this trial and help me, go over all the exhibits, put together all the link charts I had made, statement analysis, play all the interview recordings, the whole 9 yards. And so for 2 weeks, I was in there with him, kind of giving him some in-game strategy too about like, hey, I noticed defense is picking up on this. Let's, circle back to this. So doing a lot of things that typically you wouldn't see an analyst do, but because I was so integrated in the case and had built that relationship with the CA, he felt comfortable and really wanted me to help him out. And it was a small jurisdiction too, and so a lot of times they need that kind of help. But the other thing I'll tell you is that, whenever I'm having a bad day, if it's we all have stupid things that go on in the job and all that. One of the things that I always remember is that, I'm always, doing this for the victims of these crimes and their families. And I can tell you in the Alexis Murphy investigation, I got to meet Mrs. Harrington, Morgan's mom, because she was there in support, and that was before we had solved, Morgan's case. But I got to meet the entire Murphy family. And you would have thought by the end of trial that myself, the CA, the investigators that were on that team, that we were part of the family, because they were coming up and hugging us and thanking us and all. And I'll say it's, testament that, now Alexis has been brought home in the last couple of years to the work that the FBI agent who was assigned that case and others have continued on these cases, And I'll just say that is that, right now, if you're trying to assess where do you want to go in criminal justice, look at it and see what you're most passionate about, because no matter what hits you the wrong way, whether it's the pay increase, if it comes or doesn't, if the pay's bad to start with, or if there's extra stuff that's going on in your day-to-day stuff, remind yourself every day of why you're there and what you're trying to achieve for the greater good.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Maybe I imagine we probably will have some follow-up questions on those cases, I would think, since those are high profiles. Thank you for sharing that. So, yeah.
Sure. The nice thing about going last is I get to echo a lot and keep it brief, so I will. As far as VCU gave me a great basis to build from, a great foundation. We talked about the critical thinking skills, the writing skills, certainly the presentation skills when you're in really any probation probably, but certainly local probation pretrial services. You often have to present in front of the court, and you have to be able to communicate with a wide range of people at different education levels. And so going in with all of those skills. Also, the skills to be able to see different viewpoints is really important, and I did gain that at VCU, to be sure. And so I really just think it was a great foundation, and things do pop up that do make me think back to my studies every now and then, and that was a long time ago. So much longer than most of the rest of the panel. But I will say, particularly when I was in the field, there was not a regular day. You might have thought if you were a pretrial officer that you were going to do some investigations at the jail, have those, wrapped up and ready for court, and usually you could get that far into your day, but that's because that happens before most other people come into the office. Maybe you need to, you had to be in court, and then you plan to see some people on supervision in the afternoon, maybe have an hour or hour and a half for paperwork, and then, court goes long, you get stuck there. You have somebody on supervision that was not on your schedule that comes in crisis, and now you've got to deal with that. You have somebody that did have an appointment, you ask them how they were, you maybe are the first person that's ever asked them that, and they tell you their entire life story. You wanted the, I'm fine. That's not what they're giving you. That's not really what you wanted. So days really, it is true that it's rare for there to be a typical day. Maybe a coworker's out and you've got to cover drug testing or, some other things. Certainly once you get up in supervisory level, you're doing more coverage of people on positions. And also more meetings. That's the one thing I was thinking about as you move up. You do a lot more meetings. I know when I was director of Richmond, after my first probably month or two there, I called a former supervisor and I said, when do I get to do the work? I'm always in meetings. I always have to stay late to actually get the work done. And so it really does become a balancing act and really being able to protect your time. And that's whether, to the extent that you can when you're in the field or as you move into more supervisory positions. And I know my current position, I get the opportunity to manage an absolute superstar team. Of subject matter experts, and it is, my job is great. I love it. I've actually loved every job I've had. But it is so fun to work with this group. I meet with them a lot. I meet with other stakeholders a lot. I meet with our constituent groups and some of our grantees, a lot of internal meetings, but also a lot of opportunity to get involved in some fun projects. Like right now, I'm working really closely with our pretrial services expert to implement a new risk assessment our pretrial risk assessment in the state of Virginia. And so right now, it's our state team, and we have 3 local pilot sites. But at some point, we will go statewide with that. And so it's kind of some of those fun things that you get to be involved with. I know you guys do a lot around evidence-based practices. My probation subject matter expert is working on a whole kind of evidence-based practice reset for probation. And so it's just exciting to see what they do. A couple of things. I did not think, well, I will tell, when you talked about the photo in your office, it made me think, one of the things that I have in my office, and I have carried around in my office since, I guess probably post-VCU, but I had before VCU, is when I worked volunteering for a nonprofit and doing reentry work. I had a gentleman who had spent a number of years in prison, 20 plus years. And when he came out and we were providing services, he drew me these pictures of these wizards. Now, that's not necessarily the genre I would probably choose for decoration, but they are so well done. And so I have them framed and I keep them in my office because it reminds me of how much talent is wasted in our prison systems. The other thing, though, that I did say when I thought of this, I was like, kind of, I think what you said, that it's not necessarily particularly glamorous. It's very office-based. Local probation and pretrial services in particular is office-based, so you're between the court and the office mostly. Some of your other, when you get to juvenile, when you get to state, when you get to federal, you do get to go out into the field more. But being local probation and pretrial services, we are really office-bound. But one of the things that I've always loved, and I still love, in fact, sometimes, even though I don't do direct service anymore, if I get invitations to, are specialty court graduations. I find them to be so inspiring. So whether it's a drug court or a behavioral health docket or a veterans court, because those programs are so hard. I have my entire career practically joked that I'm not sure I could make it through a drug court program, being a pro-social, non-drug using person. They are so structured and so hard, and generally the people that are going into them haven't had a lot of structure. And they haven't had to work that hard, or they haven't worked that hard. And so to see people get through those programs successfully and go on and live fulfilled, successful lives is really inspiring to me. So if you ever get a chance to even just go sit in on one, it's well worth it. I do find them to be really uplifting and inspiring. So yeah.
Thank you. And just as a side note, I appreciate all of your experiences and your stories because it humanizes our system that sometimes doesn't always give back to families and people. So I appreciate the personal touches, including the wizard picture, right? So that's awesome. So you kind of hit on one of my last points that I'd like to discuss, if you can share with us, with like qualifications and skills and experiences. But I want to flip it and start with the first question here, which is if you can go back in time a little bit for me and imagine yourself being in their shoes, whether it's getting ready to graduate, starting to think about what you want to do. If you could go back in time and give yourself advice, like what would you give yourself advice about preparing for careers? Some of y'all hit on it a little bit, right? So what advice would you have for yourself, and what other advice do you have for the students here looking to get into these new careers?
I guess I'll go first again. I would say the biggest thing that I wish I had told myself as a newly graduate of VCU is not getting caught up in what society and academia deems the correct time to do things, right? You don't want to fall into that hole of, I need to graduate undergraduate degree, I need to go to my master's, and then I need to go to my PhD. You don't have to do it that way. And, you know, it goes with all things, graduate school, internships. You know, I think you mentioned that you didn't spend a lot of time in the criminal justice field right after graduation, and that's okay. So I would say, you know, not getting caught up in what society deems the norm, right? Do things at your own pace, and take risks. Take those internships. Rely on your professors. They are a key and instrumental tool for you all to utilize because they know people that you don't know. You know, most importantly, make time for yourself. School will always be there, hopefully, for everybody, but you only have one life to live, right? So make time for yourself and don't stress. I have a lot of gray hairs. You can't see it just yet, but yeah. And then I think in terms of going into a career in the criminal justice field, again, not following the norm. It's okay to not follow the norm and work in the big three, courts, policing, and corrections. And I think I really found this out in my graduate studies. I had many conversations with Dr. Cook right there, and several other professors when I was finding what I was passionate about, which was recovery and reentry work, making a difference at the local level, really, and the community level. And you know, I think for those of us that really want to see reform and make change happen by giving ourselves, you know, quote, permission to go outside the big three of the norm is really a huge piece because change can be made at the local level, and that's typically where it starts anyways, right? And I see it firsthand every day in the clients that I work with, and we have amazing graduations as well that are so remarkable, and I am happy with the direction that I personally made. So I would just, you know, advocate for you all to find what you're passionate about, and if you don't know, ask. You know, and shadow and internship, because, you know, you could think that you want to be a police officer and then you go on a ride along and think, okay, that's not for me. And that's okay. And just find what you're passionate about, because that makes it all worth it.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what she was saying. So I have a couple things. One is don't give up, okay? It is hard to get in the field sometimes. I had to apply for my job several times, and that was after being an intern, okay? Having that experience, having a master's degree, and I still had to apply a few times. And that was because it's competitive. There's people out there who have done the same thing or have more experience than you. or maybe it was just their time and it wasn't yours. But don't give up, okay? It can happen. It's very frustrating. And I know that firsthand from my experience, but also I have been, for the last several years, been the one who's interviewed and hired our interns. And that is such a hard position for me because I want to bring in more than I can, and we just don't have the space. We have a small program. I think there's 14 of us, but we just physically don't have the space. Emotionally, to have more than maybe 2 is tough because you're so busy that you don't necessarily have the time to supervise and train more than 1 or 2 interns. So having to pick and interview and everything is tough. So yeah, I would say don't give up, and also be open-minded to the different careers out there. Because when I was going through undergrad, through the criminal justice program, I was just like, I loved what I was learning. I thought it was fascinating, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. Everything was about the offender and about the crime and about, you know, the Department of Corrections. It was all about that stuff, and I just couldn't figure out how this fit into my life. And it was only because someone from a program like mine came to one of my classes in grad school that I even knew that my current job existed. I hadn't heard of it. I hadn't seen it in a textbook. You know, professors weren't talking about it as much. I mean, they were focused on other topics. So be open-minded, ask a lot of questions, and that will be really helpful.
And we definitely appreciate that 3 of those last interns were VCU criminal justice, putting that out there, so.
You wanna go?
Oh, yeah, I can. So yeah, I definitely would echo be open. Look into different options, different careers, different jobs, and also don't think this is what I'm gonna do for the next 50 years, right? I know the way, well, even I have changed every probably 5 to 6 years. I've been in my current job 3 years. I plan to stay there. So, but that's not necessarily a bad thing as you're continuing to grow and develop. And if you can gain some skills at one place that you can transfer to another. I know a lot of times, and this is not my reentry coordinator would be mad at me for saying this, but a lot of times people do start in nonprofit world. She wouldn't really be mad at me, but we were kind of talking yesterday about how a lot of times the reentry world then loses people to government jobs. And so, but she said to me, but you know what? A lot of people really want to stay in nonprofit world. They don't want to go work for the government. And so she was giving me a different perspective on that. But I do know that that happened to be my entry point, which is why I point to it. I also know a lot of people will start, and I think this speaks to the proximity piece, but more, you know, in kind of correction officer roles or those sorts of things. And now that is historically true. I don't know if that actually is still true. But again, it gives you experience with that population and working with that population. And a lot of times, and as you alluded, you can move within a department. So if you get into like a Department of Corrections or juvenile, you can kind of move within it and become counselors, become probation officers, you know, do different things. So, so sometimes looking at government is, if you can get into kind of more of an entry level and then grow from there, is a good way to do it. But I do think that's great advice that both of you gave. I will say I also did not know what local community corrections was before I kind of fell into my position. So I feel very, very fortunate to have done that. I know that's not so easy for everybody, but definitely, you know, again, if you have to piece together part-time jobs so you can work a little bit in the field but still make enough to survive while you're doing that, the more you can do and the more you can get yourself involved and experience different things, I think the better.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. The only advice that I think I would have given myself is to have just continued through my master's program, because, you know, work-life balance, mother, wife, writing papers just don't feel good at 50-something. But I did it, and it was very rewarding. Also, you know, having more education kind of helps you negotiate the table if you don't have a lot of experience for your salary, because you still want to live decently. But other than that, I don't think I would change a thing, because like I said, I've always wanted to work with kids, and I just happen to do that, right? So for me, it's, I don't even know, sometimes should I be taking money, because it's just that good to me, right? But, you know, throughout my journey, I've learned so many life lessons, and the nuggets that I receive, I don't think I ever would get out of a textbook. So sometimes you got to go right in it, because, you know, working in corrections, I learned how to work with kids. You know, working in probation, I've learned how to work and navigate resources in the court and the community. So my advice to you guys is to really find what it is that you want to do, that brings you joy. Because at the end of the day, it's nothing like going to work and not like being there. Right? And then not being paid well. So that really would be a bummer, right? So, and make connections with folks who's doing the job, and like you're doing today, you know, research before you make commitments. But like you all said, you don't have to commit to that one thing, because you can grow, like I have grown within my career. So that would be my advice to you, and good luck.
Thank you. And Thomas, you're going to have the last statement here, but then we're going to open it up to some questions and answers, hopefully. But yeah, advice for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, so if I were speaking to myself, you know, back when I was graduating, or even when I was in school, and these are probably some of the same things you guys are going through right now. I remember being like, oh my gosh, like, this course isn't going well. What am I going to do? You know, okay, do I want to do this, or do I want to do that in the career field? You know, so there are a lot of things I think I would just tell myself, you know what, just stay the course and be patient, you know, and realize too that it's going to be okay. All right. You know, you get a course, you know, you don't do that well in the course. Happened to me. You know, it's going to be okay, because you're going to have other courses that you do better in, because you just click with it more, you know. There's just certain things like that. And I think you guys have, you know, there have definitely been an expanse in terms of the number of courses you all have in Homeland Security and criminal justice with specific topics than what we had even back when I graduated in 2008. So that's really good that you have those areas. And if you want to really challenge yourself, do 3 senior seminars in an additional writing intensive class. I did that. What was funny about that is you guys laugh and you're like, holy cow, like that must have been a lot. Those were actually the courses I did the best in, because they challenged me the most, you know. But I think, you know, you're going to have a plan, and if you don't have a plan, you're going to come up with a plan soon of, hey, I want things to happen in this order of events when I graduate, and I can tell you right now it's going to change, okay? A lot of different factors. One, the job market, you know, like I mentioned before, I graduated during the Great Recession. Hopefully you all don't have to deal with that, because none of us want to deal with that. But, you know, the job market's going to play a role in that. What's open is going to play a role in that. Also, too, you know, are people retiring out of positions? Is there upward mobility in our organization? You know, that all plays a factor. The other thing, too, is that you may find somebody that you know, meet, and you're like, hey, I love this person and I want to move to this area and all. That will too change your plan a little bit, okay? The other thing too is that you may get into a job and you say, you know what, this is a temporary thing and I'm going to move on to that. You may also get into a job and say, you know what, I really like what I'm doing here, you know? My first position within the department right out of college, like, I love that job. Doing, you know, policy training work, you know, going down to the crime commission, working with the General Assembly, like, that stuff was cool. Like, but now that I've done investigative work, not as interested, okay? Investigative work for me is much more interesting. So I would definitely say, you know, be patient, you know, things will come. The other thing too is that in order for you to be able to take those chances on the things that you may want to do, make sure that you have your financial house in order. And I know that's going to sound like a lot, you know, well, hey, wait a second, we're in school. Even when you're in school, you can work on that. And I'm not saying you got to be debt-free or anything like that. But what I'm saying is that at least if you have that in order, at least somewhat, you do have the opportunity to take chances when otherwise you might be playing it a little safe and say, I'm not quite ready to take that risk.
Yep.
So.
Excellent. Well, before we open it up to questions and answers, I'd like to thank you all on behalf of the L. Douglas Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs here at VCU, and a little round of applause, please. Thank you much. So we have a few minutes, and then we'll actually have some time to mingle after we wrap this up. But questions. I hope we have some good prepared questions for any of the panelists or all of the panelists. First, foremost, you can ask from back here. You're welcome to come up to the stage if you want to as well. Go ahead.
Is there a way to get into investigative work without policing?
Yes. That's,
Well, and you've never been in uniform, is that correct?
no.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I am not sworn. I do not carry a badge and a gun, but, I mean, like I mentioned, to you guys earlier, I, do things like review entire case files, come up with leads, meet with victim family members, help out on interviews from time to time when needed, do investigative genetic genealogy. You've probably heard about that in the news where we're, really advancing a lot of cases. So we do a lot of the work research-wise and forensic testing on that end. Evidentiary reviews, the whole 9 yards. The only thing I tell people all the time, like, the one thing I love about my job and my teammates' job is that, we get to do a lot of the same things that you would do in a sworn capacity as far as like, some of the behind the scenes investigative work. The only thing we don't do is we don't put the cuffs on the guy at the end of the day, okay? And we've even had some cases in some analysts where, they've been asked to come into, a room and talk to the offender, once they've been arrested, because one of our analysts has done, cell phone analysis and said, hey, I found this or whatever. Now that's assuming that the offender is willing to talk, which a lot of times they're not, but you can definitely do that in an intelligence analyst role for sure. And to just a side note, if you want to get some of that experience, we have an internship program through the Fusion Center in which I, recruit a lot of students through that. It is competitive, but, certainly apply.
Good question. Go ahead.
That's a great focus, and there's certainly a lot happening in that specific area right now. There's certainly agencies in the area that focus on human trafficking. There's even like a home, like a temporary shelter for trafficking victims. So getting in some place like the YWCA, they work a lot with trafficking victims, would be a great place. You could volunteer or maybe get an internship with them. Or even like an agency like mine, we work with trafficking victims as well. I don't do as much with them, honestly. I work in the juvenile and domestic court, focusing more on family violence and domestic intimate partner violence. But there's about 4 advocates in my office that do a lot with trafficking. So just getting out there and like even shadowing, saying, hey, I want to just see what this is all about. Can you just tell me about it? We're always willing to do that.
Question?
And you can also do that from an intelligence analyst perspective as well. We actually just went through the hiring process for 2 human trafficking intelligence analysts at State Police.
Oh, nice. So hand back here. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So the internships through the Fusion Center, we have several different teams within the Fusion Center that focus on, like my team focuses on unsolved violent crimes and cold cases. We've got a gang, investigative team. We have a cyber team, general criminal activity team. We have a human trafficking team, as well as a shoot, I'm forgetting one of them, sorry. Point is like we're all hazards, all crimes, kind of thing. And what we do is basically for the interns that come through is we try to integrate them, with the different teams so you get experience in a little bit of each of the different swim lanes investigatively. But, for example, an average intern could sit there and, write intelligence products on emerging issues and trends that we have going on, provide assistance on special events. A lot of the ones who work with me, I'm like, hey, I've got this homicide cold case here. I'd like you to take a look at it and give me your perspective on it, and so that's something we do, once we've trained them up a little bit, on how to look at some of these things and also the databases that we have access to and all. So it's very, very, hands-on immersion type program. And we've seen the interns that, who put a lot of work into it be very successful, when they go to apply for other jobs.
Do you have a second question?
Yeah, so the other team members, I've got a pretty diverse background as far as experience and all. For example, like one of our part-time analysts is a retired NCIS special agent, who had 20-some years worth of cold case experience, and he was volunteering out of one of our division offices on cases. And finally, I was like, "Hey Dan," I'm like, come over here and work with me. Like we could use you, And so we have folks like him. I have a former VCU sergeant in the investigations division who's on my team now. She was a VCU graduate from the criminal justice program, and then one of our members of our team, I came right through our internship program, and then we have another one that's currently in the hiring process that I can't say too much about because for HR reasons, but we have a wide range of experiences. And I will say that, I mentioned we've had over 40 students come through the internship program. 90% of those have jobs in the field, whether it be, private, federal, state, and local. And we've hired on 7 of those individuals from that program directly into the Fusion Center. So you can definitely, if you're asking like, hey, can I go from an internship to a paid position? Absolutely, but timing is key, okay? Because one of the things we had recently in the last few years was a compression study and some reclassification done, which was good for the employees as far as finally getting us, a big pay increase versus like the normal 2%, once every so many years. But one of the things that did is when we reclassified a lot of these positions, we're getting a lot of former law enforcement, former military, former folks who are in the intelligence community that are applying for these positions. And I say that not to discourage you, but just know that you will probably have to apply, to multiple positions for that opportunity. And I just say that because it always depends on who applies, all right? You may go into a pool where you get, folks that have, 5 candidates have 10 years worth of experience in law enforcement or in the intelligence community. It's like, okay, yeah, that's hard to overcome, but that being said, I've seen some very experienced folks come into an interview and completely lay an egg. And then I've seen an intern come in an interview and they're phenomenal. So at that point, too, a lot of it comes to how you articulate your knowledge, skills, and abilities in the interview process. And if you do that successfully, sometimes you can overcome that, somebody with more experience.
Good. Yeah. Again, I think that's that proverbial foot in the door, right? And timing, right? Good. Hand? Saw hand. Any other questions that you want to address for the entire group? Thank you. Go ahead.
Were there any minors that you guys did in your undergrad that helped you in your careers?
Good question.
Minors.
Minors. Okay.
It wasn't undergrad for
French?
me.
I heard French out there. Yeah.
So my goal was to be a French teacher. I was in the education program here. I was studying French. That was what I was going to do. And just so you know, because I did mention that. I took a criminal justice class my last semester when I was supposed to graduate. And I was like, sorry. I was like, oh my God, this is really cool and interesting. And I don't know, I want to do something with this. So then I took on a dual degree situation. But I didn't do a minor. In grad school, I did a minor, it's a certificate in gender violence intervention, and I think that focus was good for me for working with domestic violence victims, but I think there's probably several minors that are probably good, at least in my field. People come from a different fields of study. We have a social worker in my office. We have someone who majored in education, working with children, so she works in the juvenile court with me. Different backgrounds are certainly helpful.
Yeah, I'll also add to that too. I didn't specifically minor, but in my undergraduate degree, before I found criminal justice, I wanted to be a forensic scientist. And then I took organic chemistry and I was like, absolutely not. You either got it or you don't got it. And I didn't have it. So then I found criminal justice, and I actually still took, the forensic level classes as well, Dr. Worry's class. And then in my graduate studies, I also took more Homeland Security classes. So I had forensics, I had criminal justice, and I had Homeland Security, which I think were the big 3 for me to figure out where I wanted to go and what I didn't want to do. So, I can't speak to the minor piece, but I will say just expanding your scope of the classes that you can take is definitely essential when it comes to everything, because they all connect somehow, right? And that's how I was able to do it.
And if I can just add, I mean, I did the three majors, poli-sci, criminal justice, and homeland security. That's just the way it works out when you transfer sometimes, and you got credits that apply to certain things. But I would say that it's very easy to double major with a lot of these courses because the course is cross-list, so just take a look at that. But I will say that a lot of the legal and constitutional classes that I had in the poli-sci major, as well as in the criminal justice and homeland security major, those were highly beneficial for what I'm doing now, just because they really kind of, train you to look at things very critically, and of course your writing skills and all really develop from that as well. And I'll be honest with you, recently I looked back at one of my college papers. You're going to continue to grow in your writing skills, as your profession goes on, because I looked at some of those and I'm like, ooh.
I think we have time for one more. I saw your hand. One more question, then I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Cook.
Well, first, thank you guys for coming. This has been very helpful. I think you guys all touched on the importance of volunteer work. Yeah. And I'm curious, for those of you that are involved in the hiring process, when reviewing the resume, do you prefer or do you value that professional experience over the volunteer work? Or for those of you in nonprofit work, do you value that diversity in volunteering more so?
Yeah, so I would say in my organization, if you don't have a strong work history, that's okay. Just to speak personally, I worked at a retirement home, y'all, for 7 years prior to getting involved in the nonprofit world. Well, they were nonprofit as well, but the nonprofit criminal justice world. And my experience was specifically volunteer work. I had steady work history and then my degrees, right? So my undergraduate degree and my master's degree helped me gain the opportunity that I had today. And then Dr. Cook would be remiss if I didn't continue to highlight the internships, right? Gaining that experience, whether, you're probably going to be doing the grunt work. I know I did, but just gaining that knowledge and experience will also help. But we personally at Real Life, we look for everything. If you don't have a strong work history, we're looking at your academics, we're looking at your volunteer work, we're looking at organizations you've been a part of, anything and everything that could make you a strong candidate. Because like Thomas said, the ones with the most experience might not interview very well, right? But the ones that come out with, educational experience and volunteer work, you might be more well-rounded than they are. So just provide everything, I think. That's what we look for.
I was just gonna say, I would second that. I look at more the skills versus the specific experience, because I worked, for example, in retail all through undergrad and grad school. And so, if you're familiar with that, you're dealing with people who are upset, and it's customer service, it's dealing one-on-one with people who may not be happy about something that has nothing to do with you. So, being able to tie skills to a job is really important. Don't minimize your experience. If you work, like you said, Thomas said, in food service or customer service, that certainly ties in. I think the fact that you can tie it all together is, for me, the most important. Yeah.
Agreed.
And as Dr. Cook is walking up, I'll say a big thing that's in our department is diversity and equity. And so you come with an open mindset and acceptance and inclusion. So keep those words in the back of your mind, because that's really important in the work field. I'm done, Dr. Cook.
All right, so here's what I heard. Get an internship. Love group work. They actually didn't tell you that, but when you wonder why you have to do group work, none of these folks talked about, I get to make the decisions, I get to make the rules, they're engaged with other people. And you didn't hear that sometimes those people disagree, but they come to a really strong solution because of it. The other thing I heard is presentations. So when you hate to give the presentation, and no, embrace it, because you're gonna have to sell who you are, what you know, how you know what you know when you wanna get a job. So internships, organizational experience, 90%. I took notes, right, just like a good studious person does. 90% of the people who intern end up with a job. I heard that. I don't remember who said it. Transfer your skills, right? There are people who can help you do that, and they are the people that teach these classes. So instead of pretending like you don't know who we are, we want to see you. We have office hours. You have to engage us because we can take you. I'm going to use Sydney as the model here. We can force you to get an internship, and then look where she is. But she's not the only one. I could bring back so many students. Our advising team knows this to be true. We need for you to know it to be true. Okay, so I hope that you've enjoyed today, that you've learned a lot. Listen up closely. If you sign up to get more information about an internship with our Office of Student Success, Ms. Rhonda's in the back, she's standing up right now, then you have an opportunity to win a prize. Don't go anywhere, okay? So after we give you a chance to mingle with these folks, I also don't want to forget Shanika Barber. Stand up. She is here from Henrico Community Corrections. They need interns, all right? If you can't talk to her because you have to go to another class, I can give you a card. And then it's got her contact information. And she is a former student of ours here in the criminal justice program. She went through the program with Sydney. And so, yeah, engage these folks. You heard about opportunities. If you are interested in interning with juvenile probation, it doesn't have to just be with Chesterfield, but if you're close to Chesterfield, talk to Teresa. We already know everybody else has opportunity. I expect you to get a job before you leave here, okay? All right, take care and thank you for coming.